Greetings and welcome to the Hamptons. My name is Sandra Kay. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to my guest today, Lady Patricia Farmer, historian and best-selling author. Today, we will be discussing her latest book, Tea Under the Palms. Welcome, Patricia.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited.
Yes, and we've been trying to get together now for some time.
Months.
Yes,
Months.
and we're finally here, so I'm delighted.
My
Really
pleasure.
delighted. I'd like to begin by asking you to share with us your introduction to tea and how you fell in love with the art of tea.
Well, without giving any ages away, it happened a long time ago. I remember distinctly. I was 7 years old,
Yes.
and my mother took me to tea at the Plaza in the city, New York City. And I was mesmerized, first by the glamour and the elegance, and even having to put on my Sunday manners, you
And
know.
the setting that you
Oh,
were sitting.
It was like your beautiful set here. There were palm trees
Yes.
inside the building, and I had never seen anything like that before. So I decided, number one, this is how I wanted to live. And number two, I fell in love with the Plaza,
Yes.
and eventually did live at the Plaza.
How beautiful. Well, let's start by touching on a little brief history of tea and how it now has evolved to be the second beverage next to water consumed throughout the world.
Don't you find that amazing?
It is amazing.
You know, if somebody were to ask you what's the number one or number two beverage consumed in the world, and to have tea.
Yes.
And it's not unusual once you go back and look at the history.
Yes.
It's been since the beginning of time almost,
Right,
you know,
that's right.
started in China, mainly as medicinal,
Mm-hmm.
but it became one of the primary drinks. People had it for a cure for a lot of things, and it really was, you know,
Yes.
so
And
it's
longevity and
Exactly.
preventing disease. And,
Right.
then I read it did go on to Portugal.
It went on to Portugal, and then decades before it hit England,
Yes.
it made its way to France. So
Many
that's
would not know that.
no, it surprised me.
Yes.
But in learning about it, doing research on the book, I found out that King Louis and
Yes.
Marie Antoinette loved tea in the royal palace. So that became the beverage of choice. And I kiddingly say in the book that we now know what Marie was having with her cake.
Okay,
So,
that's great. That is great. Let's talk about the varieties of tea.
Mm.
Green tea, black tea,
right. And
oolong, and white tea I read.
white tea and the more delicate teas, typically the lighter the tea, you know, people might say, well,
The
this
green tea.
exactly. And they each have their own little slot and
Yes.
way to prepare it. The dark tea, you steep for 5 minutes, you know,
Okay.
and if you go out for tea, and I know you do,
Yes.
they're very precise. They even put the little timer by the teapot. So, you know, it's like 5 minutes and then 3 minutes and 2 minutes for the more delicate.
And black
teas.
tea is the most consumed tea.
Right, absolutely. And you
75% they say drink black tea, which is Earl Grey and
Darjeeling and
yes.
Earl Grey, there's a funny story. It's actually named after a person, a real person. And it was a diplomat. I think his first name was Charles, but it was Grey. And he kept being given this beautiful blend of tea. And he always complimented it. And finally, the tea company made a blend called Earl Grey, you know,
Okay.
in his honor.
Now, also in your book, you do talk a great deal about loose tea versus tea bags?
Oh no, did I talk too much about it?
No, but you certainly made a statement that once you have loose tea, you're not going back.
I think my preference shone through there a little bit.
Yes.
Um,
So please explain the differences to us.
Well, loose tea is just as one would think it would be. It's loose tea without the benefit of a tea bag, being enclosed in a tea bag. So it does require a little bit more effort.
Yes, I
You-
did bring a teapot with a diffuser over here just to show how the
Mhm.
loose tea would go into a distiller and then you pour in.
Right,
The hot
the
water.
hot water.
Yes.
Or some people even just pour it into the teapot and then strain it over each cup.
Okay.
But my preference is the loose tea because it's more controllable, I'd say.
Well, and flavorful.
And
because you have the
flavorful.
full leaf.
Right, exactly, and you can control the quality by looking at it. You know, you can tell, oh yeah, those are full leaves. You know, rather than in a tea bag, some of the lower brand tea bag manufacturers put what they call fannings in there, which is kind of dust.
Okay.
You know, tea dust.
Not an actual leaf.
Right, or the
Okay.
leftover, you know, after you cure the tea and then scoop it up, what you have left over, it's like dust or fannings, they call it.
Something else that I found interesting is the harvesting of tea is by hand.
Yeah,
That is amazing.
and
When
it's
you
quite
think
a
about all the tea
process.
consumed around the world,
Mm-hmm,
and it's done by hand.
yeah, quite a process, you know,
Yes.
between the picking, and it has to be exactly timed correctly, and then the drying and the different processes for the different teas. Again, going back to that black, green, white tea, uh, you know, dictates how long you leave it to dry and how early you can pick it. But
Okay, now let's talk about high tea versus low tea.
can I back up just a little
Sure,
bit?
of
I
course.
don't want to offend anybody who likes tea in a bag.
Oh,
And there are good companies
certainly
now
it's
that
convenient.
that they're, you know, Fortnum and Mason comes out with a beautiful
Yes.
silk tea bag, and you know, some of the better tea.
Harrods, and we have the coronation from the king,
I
tea
didn't
from
even see
London.
those there.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So, you
Which
know,
are wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
right.
Yes. And I recently, actually, this is delicious. This is
Which one?
peppermint and licorice from Harrods.
I
gotta tell
never
you,
would
I
have.
love it. It
I'm gonna
is
have to
so-
try them.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Licorice and peppermint. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so you
I
made
would
your
not have
note.
done that.
Now let's talk about high tea versus low tea. Where did the names come from and what do they mean and represent?
It's probably the exact opposite from what you think it's going to mean. You know, high tea started in England,
Mhm.
and the employers figured out, excuse me, that the caffeine content in tea works as a stimulant, and it's giving tea breaks. Got their workers back all energized. But they
Yes.
weren't gonna set out a beautiful table like this, you know, and have their workers there. So they had the small, round, high tables
Yes.
that now we see for cocktail parties sometimes.
And that was set up generally between 5 and 7 p.m., is that correct?
Right,
Mhm.
exactly right. But it had the high stools and people just kind of leaned into them, and you had a meal sometimes also with it. Where low tea was where you might have it in your home on a lovely settee or a couch, a low couch or low comfortable chairs like these.
And when we think of afternoon tea, is that generally low tea between the hours of 3 and 5 or?
Right. Afternoon tea has really replaced the low tea because we don't have that
Okay.
many tea gatherings in our homes so much anymore.
Maybe if we go
Sometimes,
to England
but yeah,
and
there you go.
Ireland.
Yes, we do that a lot. But so it's not a matter of class, I guess.
Okay.
It's a matter of chairs.
I
So
Okay,
it's high
that's
chairs or
interesting.
low chairs, not high class and low class.
Okay, well, I thought we might have a tea party of sorts. You talk a great deal in your book about etiquette
Hmm.
and debates on different milk or no milk, cream on scones before jam and jelly. So why don't we begin by talking about some of the rituals in setting up a tea set from the tiered food.
The tiers are really a staple.
Okay,
We might change the china and the silverware, but almost always you will have the three tiers for a tea party, for an
yes,
afternoon tea. And they start at the bottom typically with the scones and the tea cakes, which are not the real sweet pastries.
okay,
So, and then you work your way up. So you have scones, and usually they're presented warm, and you might take one and open it, and you
I
never,
read that you said you're not supposed to use a knife. You're
right,
supposed to break the scone.
exactly. Don't go thinking it's, I don't know what, a piece of toast or an English muffin. You don't use a knife anywhere near it. So you just break it open, and then you break off a small piece, and you can put your uh, clotted cream or your lemon curd right on that. And you brought up the debate,
Yes,
and it is a debate.
yes,
Nobody has decided it, even though in England they take polls yearly.
okay,
So between the Cornish style and the Devon style, they like to brag about who's ahead, who's winning in the poll. So the debate is, do you put your clotted cream on first
okay,
and then put the jam on,
yes.
jelly, marmalade, lemon curd? Or do you put your jams and jellies on first and then put the,
Interesting.
yeah,
Well,
what would
here
your
in the
preference
States, I
be?
mean, I would compare the clotted cream to a butter. So
Mm-hmm.
we generally put butter first, and then we would add our jelly or our jam. So I think that's what I would tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that it's apparently about a 50-50.
It is amazingly,
Yes,
and I'm with you, but it is a debate. And somebody pointed out to me, um, it's almost like Jello. Like you wouldn't put your whipped cream at the bottom of a bowl of Jello and then
that's
put the
right.
Jello on it. So that's how I think I'm right, or we're right.
What I'd
Right.
like to ask you to do, Patricia, if you would, could you raise your tea cup and show us the proper way to drink a cup of tea?
Okay. You always raise the cup. Some people think you have to bring the saucer with you, but no. And you always bring the tea to you. You never bend over and, do that thing. So you always bring it up. And there's been much debate again, always some debate about how to hold it,
Okay,
and typically these cups have nice big handles,
mhm.
where you could put your finger through it. But typically you don't want to do that. You kind of pinch it and
And
just
three
balance
fingers,
it.
thumb,
Right.
index finger,
And
middle finger.
I always just kind of scooch them
Okay,
around for balance too.
okay.
And that's where,
Well, talking about balance,
mhm.
let's talk about the pinky.
Oh my gosh.
Where does the pinky come into
Another,
place?
well, it was exactly for balance. Back in the day when China, the country, not China, um, was serving tea, they had, much like sometimes you see now, the bowls, the cups, without any handle. So you
Mhm.
had to kind of like hold it and balance it. And then later on, when handles did start appearing, they were all too small to get your
Well, and
fingers
also,
through.
didn't women tend to raise their pinky for a sense of elegance?
Elegance, yes.
And elitism, if you will, and
And there's big debate now. Some say it's a little bit too precious to, put your fingers up, but others say it's just perfectly fine and the balance thing is still going on.
have you
So
found in the tea houses, have you noticed if women are still raising their pinky or,
I find that they are.
okay,
You do have, again, I don't have, I haven't seen a poll, so I
Yes.
don't know, but I think, in my opinion, and what I've observed is that maybe gals that aren't going to tea every week and they feel a little bit intimidated, they don't want to spill it, they don't want it to shake, so they kind of put that pinky up for a little counterweight to make sure, everything looks good.
Okay, another debate, milk.
Oh,
Do we
gosh.
add milk at the bottom? Do we add it after the tea is poured? Where does milk fall into place?
I think nowadays you can do what you want, but
Okay,
again, there is a reason why milk used to be put in first. Back when tea became something for the masses. So you had every class. It had trickled down from royalty to just everyday housewives to the workers. And the china, for some, that couldn't afford Spode or Wedgwood, was less than perfect. So if you poured boiling water in, they might tend to crack. So what was very common is you'd put a little bit of milk at the bottom, protecting your embarrassment of breaking your cups, and then you'd pour the
Interesting.
tea over it, and it tempered that. And they also say it killed the bacteria in the milk from
Okay.
back then. Now everything's a little bit more protected,
Okay,
the milk
also in
is.
terms of etiquette at a tea house, one should not have their phone out. One should not talk about your bag, a woman's pocketbook. Where do you put
Exactly.
the pocketbook?
Well, the first thing you do upon, going to meet your friends or meet your family for a nice afternoon tea, if you're going to St. Regis or wherever, you say hello to everyone, and then you get to your seat. And I've often thought that, especially here in America, we spend so much money on our handbags. And then typically we throw them on the floor. Maybe not throw them on the floor, but we
Well, we
end up
put them
putting them
down.
on the floor.
Right.
And that is, most other countries don't do that at all. Even I find in France, they have a table that slides out and you put your bag right there. So the best place is to put it right behind your seat,
Okay.
and these are beautiful chairs, but.
And many tea rooms, of course, do have some of the beautiful chairs and
Right,
wonderful seating,
right.
so it can be comfortable to
Right, and
have on your lap or behind.
the benefit of, like, if you're in a restaurant and you have the straight back chairs, is you put it back there and it kind of makes your posture a little bit better too.
That's right.
You have that little lumber bag right behind you. So you come in and you say hello to everyone, you put your bag where it should be, and nothing personal goes on the table. Don't put sunglasses or your phone or anything on the table. Those go into your handbag, that goes behind your back.
Okay.
And you sit down, take your napkin, and you put it on your lap immediately.
Wonderful. Also in your book, you speak to hotels around the world where to have high tea. And I know you had mentioned in your book about Sketch, a famous place in London that's very artsy and very beautiful. Tell us a little about high tea or tea, afternoon tea at Sketch.
Oh, it was an experience, and I didn't know what to expect when I first went there, but I've enjoyed it so much I've now been back several times.
Okay,
And you hit it on the head. It's very artsy,
yes.
and it even changes. You know, I think from the time I wrote the book to the last time a month ago when I was there, they had painted, and I was telling people about the pink bathrooms, and they're like, it
The
was,
egg pod
yes,
toilets?
yes. Did you see them when you were
Yes.
there?
Yes, I did.
And
It was great. And also that you can taste or smell the scent of a tea leaf to determine the tea you want to select. And you can also have limitless finger foods, scones, all of the
exactly.
parts.
And if you're feeling up to it, a glass of champagne,
Yes,
which I am always up for it.
okay.
Give me chocolate and champagne any day.
That is
So-
great. You also talk about in Manhattan, obviously the Plaza, of course,
Right.
which your book speaks to the title, Tea Under the Palms, the Plaza Hotel.
Right.
But you also talked a lot about Alice's teacup and your fascination with how those two sisters created such
Right.
a fascinating spot. Tell us
Have
about
you
it.
ever been to there?
Yes,
Been there?
yes.
I love it. And they also, again, going back to Tea for the Masses, wanted to make it more interesting. You know, not your tea sandwiches look beautiful.
Thank
and
you. I
know
did
you
make these
them.
yesterday. It is my first time. I followed your book and I had a lot of fun with it. It was great. And it's funny, I packed a little, I must just say, I packed a sandwich for my husband this morning. And my son-in-law actually joked that, because I told him I packed a sandwich, he says, maybe you should do more shows, Sandra. And he's British. My husband calls me, I'm like, why is he bothering me before his show? He says, that sandwich was delicious. Anyway.
And you cut the crust
And
off.
I cut
Thank
the
you.
crust off.
I know you're setting standards now.
So-
But Alice's wanted to
Yes.
make the sandwiches a little bit more substantial and make it heartier and make it more like Alice in Wonderland, but
Yes.
almost like a little bit of a kooky, crazy Alice in Wonderland. It's definitely worth a trip there. And it's, you never know what celebrity you're going to bump into there too, because it's a big go-to spot for, you know.
New Yorkers, celebrities alike.
Right,
You
and
mentioned
bringing
that.
their
Sure,
kids
their
there,
children,
their
yeah,
children there.
yeah.
I think Sari and Katie Holmes, been there multiple times, Madonna through the years, on and on, so.
Super. And I know another spot that fascinated me is the Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong, which I have not been to, but I would now, based upon your book, definitely would love to make that trip.
You have to do that, Sandra. You know,
Yes.
first of all, who doesn't love Hong Kong? It's a fascinating city, and the peninsula, I would suggest you even stay at the peninsula.
Should you fly in on a helipad if you're so fortunate?
And have them pick you up in the Rolls Royce,
You
yes.
mentioned that. So
Yes.
that's what they do once you book your reservation.
Right, they pick you up at the airport in a Rolls Royce.
That
And
is-
it's just like, you know, you've started your vacation, like, I'm here, next stop tea.
Yes.
And it is quite the event and the occasion. It's still very British influenced. The waiters are in white jackets and white gloves and the silver teapots and everything is just impeccable. But you do need to make reservations as soon as you know you're going
Okay.
because it's
And just
worldwide.
I do want to touch on, you do mention some Parisian spots as well that you are that are very akin to where you like to frequent.
right. I have to, before I leave the peninsula, it's another tea under the palms
Oh,
because you
okay.
have palm trees there.
Okay, that is great.
And Paris, France, anytime I get the opportunity, I'm there. So, and any city I go to, I try and find tea. So I'm kind of an expert with Parisian tea. The Plaza Athénée I love. They have a
Yes.
beautiful tea. Le Maritz, the Ritz Hotel, of course, that's,
You mentioned that's was Hemingway's spot.
yes. So you have to go, again, if you're going to Paris, I would say stay at the Ritz,
Okay.
drink in Hemingway's bar, have afternoon tea there, what's not to love about Paris?
Yes. And then one other thing I'd like to mention that you do include in your book are recipes
Mm-hmm.
from dear friends and also from many of these establishments that you have just discussed.
Right. Lauren and her sister sent me a recipe that's included
That's
in the
the,
book, Alice's Teacup. I'm
yes, the
yeah.
banana cake with
Yeah.
Nutella and cream cheese frosting.
Very good. Very good, yes.
Yes.
Uh, and I have to say the recipes were all fun. There are a lot of British, so they're not your regular tea cakes or cupcakes. It's a little bit of the British influence again,
Yes.
the jam roly-poly cake
Yes.
and uh, such like that. And that was, they were all fun, and you should have seen my kitchen for weeks and weeks. I'd get everybody over and we'd do test kitchens and just to get them perfectly right.
Well,
So,
beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Patricia, for being here. This was just a sheer delight. Um, it's been a pleasure having you. I want to thank you. I want to thank LTV, the Kate Cassidy Foundation, and everyone. It is tea time. It's time for spring. It's time to reawaken, rejuvenate, go out, enjoy this time, and enjoy a pot of tea. Kisses. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.